there, Booktube. Welcome back to my channel. It is Wednesday, July 10th. It is a little bit past the middle of the year, but I thought it was high time. I freaked out a little bit about my 2019 reading. When Sean the Book Maniac tagged me to do this video, I said I should probably do this. I've been way too relaxed about my reading. I mean, I've been sitting over here quietly reading over 100 books in the first half of 2019, but a lot of my reading goals, I still haven't met them. So while I've been reading, I haven't read some of the books that I plan to read, and I still have a lot of reading plans that I want to accomplish before the end of this year. I thought this video would be a good way to look back at some of the highlights and lowlights, some of the surprises and disappointments of my 2019 reading thus far, and also kind of a way to look ahead as I think about the goals that I still have to meet. So this video is not new. It was originated by, I think, Chami a few years ago. I don't think she has a YouTube channel anymore, so there's no point in me linking the original video, but I'm sure if you've been watching Booktube for any period of time, you've seen this video done by maybe all of your other favorite booktubers. So I'm just gonna use this opportunity to look back a little bit and share some of my answers to those questions with you. At the time of making this video, I have read 104 books already this year. And while my public number goal was to read 120 books this year, I also have a more personal goal to maybe get up to about 200 books, because I've never done that in a single year before, and I'd like to do it at some point. Maybe this is the year to finally accomplish that. Other benchmarks that I've set for myself along the way include reading all the books that have won the Booker Prize in its 51-year history. And while I have been steadily making progress on that goal, I am lagging way behind on the schedule that I set for myself. So you'll hear more about that goal later on in this video. And so that is kind of the trend with my reading. There are highlights and lowlights, surprises, some pleasant, some not, some disappointments, some happy moments, some sad moments, and some of the questions that are included in this tag address some of those highlights and lowlights. So let's get into the questions. The first question is the best book that you've read so far this year. And there have been a lot of books that I have read and really enjoyed. As I said, I have been reading the Booker list, and there have been a lot of books that have opened up my perspective and broadened my horizons, challenged me to research things that I didn't know about and didn't know that I didn't know about. And so there have been books that have changed me, but I'm gonna choose as my best read so far this year The Known World by Edward P. Jones. This is an African-American writer, and he writes about a period in American history with a very different perspective. The book is set during the latter parts of slavery, and in this one we have free black men who have become slave owners themselves. And so there's a conflict between how these black slave owners relate to their white peers, but also how they relate to the other blacks that they own as property. And I love the presentation and the conflict that the author brought about in this story, but I also love the really whimsical way in which he spoke about very harsh times and very harsh realities, but caused us to find emotion and humor and to look for other meanings, the differences between cultural and religious and class and race identities, and what all of those challenges meant for the individuals that we read about in this book. The emergence of unlikely heroes and heroines, as well as unlikely villains. And I loved a lot of things about this book. I did a buddy read, which I'm sure enhanced my appreciation of this book, but I want to read more from this author as well. So I'm gonna say that this is one of my best reads, maybe the best read so far of 2019. Question number 2 is the best sequel that you've read in 2019. And I don't read a lot of series, but I'm gonna say that my favorite sequel, well, my favorite series so far is a graphic memoir presentation of John Lewis's life. He was the son of a sharecropper who became a civil rights activist, and even now, I think he's about 80 years old, he is still someone who's been dedicating his life to the fight for freedom and equality for people in America. And so he's still serving as a congressman even in the latter parts of his life. I did a full review of the 3-volume series, so I'll link that in the description box down below if you'd like to hear more of my thoughts about the presentation as a whole. Question number 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. I've been talking about this book. I've heard a lot of people talk about this book, and so I'm really excited to read it. I thought I would have been able to read it by now, but this week has been really busy, so I haven't gotten a chance to really dive into it yet. But The Far Field by Madhuri Vijay has been recommended and hyped by a lot of people who like a lot of the same books that I do. So I'm looking forward to reading this one. Next time you hear me talk about this book, it will probably be to tell you that I've read this book. I'm sure I said that in some other video before, but I'm going to be reading this in the next couple of days. So hopefully this is the last time I say that this is a book that I haven't read yet. Speaking of new releases, question number 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And I'm going to choose The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. That should be published later in July. And I'm looking forward to reading it because I read Colson Whitehead's Pulitzer Prize winning novel, The Underground Railroad, a couple of years ago. I read it before it was nominated and won the Pulitzer Prize. And there were a lot of things that I liked about the book, but I didn't feel like I really loved the book while I was reading it. It's a book where the story, I think, grew on me the more I spoke about it afterwards. As I explained the synopsis and spoke about what the author accomplished in the book, I felt like my appreciation of the work grew. The Underground Railroad was about people trying to escape slavery and making their way to the north. But in this one, Colson Whitehead fictionalized the Underground Railroad by making it a real subway system that moved from the south to the north. And what are some of the challenges that it presented, both for the slave fugitives as well as the people who tried to help them? And so his representation of a very real part of American history and fictionalizing it in this way presented something that over time I grew to accept as being brilliant. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with the story of the Jim Crow era, which is what he addresses in this new novel. Because while the system of slavery presented very real social barriers, the Jim Crow era contained a lot of the same challenges, a lot of the same restrictions, but in a more unofficial way. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what this author does with this other period of history, what he presents in The Nickel Boys. And so I'm saying that that is my most anticipated release of the next half of 2019. Question number 5 is your biggest disappointment, and there have been quite a few books this year that I look forward to reading and didn't quite enjoy as much as I wanted to. My most recent disappointment is probably the one that lays heaviest on my heart, because I've been looking for a book that has been written by a Jamaican author or a book by someone of Jamaican heritage that I could identify with the characters. And I thought that Queenie was going to be it. Queenie by Candice Carthy Williams has been hailed as the Black Bridget Jones Diary. And the Bridget Jones Diary is a book that I have read multiple times and really enjoyed for its whimsy, for its kind of cutesy way that this female protagonist is portrayed, some of the things that she uses to occupy her time, and some of the concerns that plague her, her weight, and how many drinks and cigarettes she's had each day, and the way she tracks her progress towards becoming a better person. But none of these are very blow your mind big deals. I thought that Queenie would present some of that lightness, but the situations in Queenie were a lot harder, and I felt like the character self-sabotage in a much more real and dangerous way that I couldn't love this character. The presentation and the portrayal of sexual promiscuity and the sexual violence that was presented on the pages, it really bothered me. And so while this was a book that I wouldn't say is a bad book, it disappointed me, because this is a book that I thought that I'd be able to champion. This is a book that I thought that I'd be able to hold up and say, I love this book, I hope you love it too. I can't do that for this book, and so for me this was a big disappointment. Question number 6 is your biggest surprise. I'm going to change gears and talk about a pleasant surprise, because I've had this book on my TBR shelf for about 2 years, and now that I finally read it, I loved it. Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple is about a very quirky woman, a genius in her own right, a legend in her own time, and yet she struggles with basic interpersonal relationships, and her way of pawning off her responsibilities onto someone else, her unique way of addressing the issues that plague her. Presented Bernadette as a very socially inept character, but also one who you want to tolerate and accept and indeed even love. And so I'm going to say that this was my best and biggest pleasant surprise so far this year, because it's a book that I've had around for so long. I've put it on TBRs many times for challenges or for readathons, and now that I've finally read it, it's a favorite. Question number 7 is your favorite new author, and I just can't choose because almost all the books that I have read that I've rated 5 stars, I now want to read everything that that author has written. So I want to read books by Edward P. Jones. I want to read books by Maria Semple, although I have heard that her other books are not quite like the Bernadette book. Debut authors, I want to read more from them. So I don't have an answer. I don't have one answer for my favorite new author. Question number 8 is your newest fictional crush. And I don't have crushes on characters in books because there are no real people who are exactly represented in fiction. But if I had to choose someone who I really admired, it would be the coach in Beartown by Frederick Bachman. I really liked his way of approaching the situations that were presented to him. I like the way he stood up for the players. I like the way that he had his own set of values and ideals, and how he was pretty much unrelenting in standing up for what he believed in, even when it meant great personal loss to him. So that is something that I admire in people in real life, and so I admired it in the representation in this book as well. Question number 9 is your newest favorite character, and I'm going to choose Edgar from The Story of Edgar Sawtelle by David Roblowski. I did a buddy read of that book with Patrice Jones, and I absolutely love the portrayal of Edgar, who is, we don't know his exact age, but it is a coming of age story, so he is probably a tween or early teens when we are really exploring the breadth of his story. And he is mute from birth, but his gift of language and his gift for communication with other people as well as with other animals, and the unique way that he has of researching life and learning about life as an autodidact, he was just so amazing on those pages. I really got engaged in his story and really emotionally involved in his progress, and so I'm going to say that he was my favorite character, even if I didn't love how the book ended. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, and there have been a few this year that have done that. Girls Burn Brighter by Shobha Rao really got into my emotions in that way, but I don't have a copy of the book, so I'm going to choose another book that did the same thing, and that is Golden Child by Claire Adam. This one is set in Trinidad during the period of time in which I grew up, and so there's a lot about the portrayal of the family in this book that is very nostalgic for me, even though I didn't grow up in Trinidad. It represents a lot of the same experiences that I had as a student in Jamaica. And the nuclear family in this one are parents and their identical twin boys, who one is a little bit developmentally challenged and the other one is gifted. And when one of the boys goes missing, the family has to decide how much they value each one of the children and whether they're willing to sacrifice one for the other. It also explores the extended family and the reach that greed and family inheritance has on all the characters, what they're willing to exchange of their family relations for money. And I love the way the author treated the interpersonal relationships, but also the desire for a better life, what ambition really means and what people are willing to sacrifice for it. I really enjoyed her treatment of those themes in this book, but there were moments in this book that were just so relatable, but also so sad, so nostalgic, but also so affecting that I just broke down and cried. And so if you haven't read Golden Child yet, I'd recommend that you pick it up. It's not a book for everyone. I've heard some people say they didn't love it, although those people, those numbers seem to be much fewer and further between. I love this book. I gave it 5 stars, so I recommend it. It is one of the books that made me cry this year, so if you're looking for a little bit of an emotional read, I'd recommend that you check this one out as well. Question number 11 is a book that made you happy, and for that I'm choosing Beartown by Frederick Bachman because this is a surprising read for me as well. The story follows some teenage hockey players in a remote Swedish town, and the hope that the town has on these hockey players becoming champions and putting their town back on the map so that when the players engage in behaviors that are not necessarily consistent with what the town's values are, whether or not they're willing to forgo punishment just because it would also mean sacrificing their chance at a championship. Bachman in this one presented some very interesting social compromises and conflicts between doing the right thing and doing maybe the wrong thing for the right reasons overall. But he also presented some seemingly impossible situations, and yet I love the way that he treated the situations and gave a resolution that even when it seemed like all was lost, we got to the end where nothing was lost except the threat that everything was lost. I can't explain other than that if you haven't read Frederick Bachman, maybe you should check him out. Maybe I should say that this is my newest favorite author, except I've only read one book from him, and like I said, I want to read everything that he's published, so he's definitely on my list of favorite new authors or new to me authors. But Beartown is my first book that I read from him, and I love the resolution in this book. It's a book that made me happy. Not so much that I derive happiness from reading fiction, but I love the way that he treated the situations in this book, spoke about social justice and social injustice in a way that also brought hope to the reader. Hope that even in fiction, things can be resolved without losing or giving up everything. Question number 12 is your favorite book to film adaptation that you've seen this year. I don't watch a lot of movies, so sadly I have no answer for question number 12. Question 13, favorite review you've written, or the Booktube version, favorite video you have done so far this year. I've been slowly reviewing all the books that I have read as previous winners of the Booker Prize. So it's one of my favorite things that I have done here on the channel. I've also really enjoyed reading aloud Maya Angelou's memoirs. So those are some of my favorite videos to have shared on the channel, and really I love every video that I've put out. I love them because it gives me an opportunity to talk with you guys. So every video that I make is my favorite video. Question number 14, the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. There have been a lot of really pretty books that have come into my life. I've bought a lot of previous winners of the Booker Prize, and I love cartoon representations. Adam from Memento Mori, I think it might have been last year or the year before, he talked about the bouquet books that have these beautiful covers that have nothing to do with the synopsis of the book. But I found that some of them really appealed to me, and so I like sometimes the collage of images that are presented in these bouquet books, in that here we have a house. This is A House for Mr. Biswas by V.S. Naipaul, and here we have some objects that we see through the curtain, so it's as though we're looking into this house for Mr. Biswas. But even though I haven't read this book yet, I'm sure that these images and these articles represent something about the book. Another cover that I really enjoyed was Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively, and this one we have a face that is being represented by all of these different individual images. And so while these items on their own mean something, they all come together to make this collage of a face, and it's a portrayal of what the book really is. My video for this one should be up on my channel very soon, so you'll hear me talk a little bit more about this cover and what it means when we go through the review of this book. I'm also fascinated by cartoon representations of books that have very serious themes, and so I like these covers of Peter Carey's 2 Booker Prize winning novels, Oscar and Lucinda and True History of the Kelly Gang. I love the covers of these 2 books, and I bought them. I bought these specific editions for the covers. So these are some of my most beautiful books that I've acquired this year. There are others. Question number 15, what books do you need to read by the end of this year? All the Booker winning novels. That was one of my goals. It's one of my most vocalized reading goal here on the channel, and if I don't meet any of my other reading goals, I definitely want to meet this one. So I'm trying to read all the books that have won the Booker Prize in 2019. I hope you will come back, continue to watch my channel as we see if I can meet this goal. So that's my mid-year book Freakout. And if I was relaxed before, recording this video is making me think that maybe I should be freaking out a little bit more about my reading. So I'm gonna go read. Thanks for watching this video. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. I hope you'll come back. Talk to me in the comments about any of the books that I discussed here. Click the links and watch the videos that I mentioned, and let's talk about books. So until next time, happy reading. Bye.